We've got a great panel of speakers lined up who are going to explain the clinic, what it's about, how you can get involved, how you can support it, and to notify you of all the things, all the partners that are involved as well. It's a huge deal, and I am so glad that Hussain approached me to help host the clinic launch online. I'm just so sorry we can't do it in person, but there seems to be a huge number of people that have booked on tonight, so perhaps that was a good thing because we might well run out of coffee. If you could all stay on mute, perhaps just while everyone's talking, I'm pretty sure there'll be some time for some questions if you have them, because obviously you've probably got lots, and as we go through, feel free to contribute. Just to let you know as well, a bit of housekeeping, that we have, this session is recorded, so we want to spread the message far and wide. So if you don't mind allowing us sharing the recording, obviously you can turn your videos off, but just to let you know, we only ever focus on the speaker. As long as you keep your microphones on mute, we won't see you in the recording. So that's another reason to stay muted. Any problems at all, Emma, just pop a message into the chat to me, and we can pick that up. Again, if you're not wanting to kind of raise your hand for a question and ask over the audio, then just pop your question into the chat and I'll ask it on your behalf. So without further ado, I will hand over to Hussain and his team of speakers, and I really hope you enjoy the event. Thank you so much.
Hello everyone, thank you for joining. It's great to see so many people here and slightly nerve-wracking. Right, so my name is Hussain Said, my pronouns are he, him. I'm from the Speakeasy Law Centre, of which I'm doing my training contract. It's under this very fancy thing called the Justice First Fellowship, which is part of the Legal Education Foundation. And I say that because that's where this project has sort of originated from, I guess. I just wanted to say thank you as well to Emma and Legal News for hosting this. It's great, and also Harrod has appointed me to Emma, so thank you Harrod as well. So I really appreciate that. I'll introduce the speakers in a moment, but I'm just going to quickly give a breakdown as to the project, where it came from, what the idea is, and sort of like how it'll run. So in the we're actually live tweeting this from our newly formed Twitter account. The @ I think might be put in the chat at some point. So if you could follow that and sort of publicize as much as possible, that would be great. So the idea of this clinic, like I said, it came from the Justice First Fellowship, where you can do a project to try and increase access to social justice law and access to services for the most vulnerable within our society. So my initial project, actually, because it has changed, was a legal clinic specifically for trans individuals. And I was going to do that. And actually, after speaking to a good friend, Crash, who's also a speaker, and Crash said, well, why don't you widen it out to LGBTQ+? And I was like, oh, actually, I'll do that, but keeping an emphasis on the T. So that was kind of where it came from and the idea behind it. The way it will run is essentially, as it's through, I work in the Speakeasy Law Centre, what will happen is people can refer themselves via the website. So again, I think the link might be put in the chat of where people can go into the Speakeasy website, and then there's a drop-down menu of which there'll be the LGBTQ+ legal clinic or law clinic, and then people can refer themselves that way. I've had a lot of support from many people and many organisations, not least Lawworks and David White specifically, who's really helped me through this, and Lawworks given some resources such as insurance, and of course the Speakeasy Law Centre, which has been really helpful, of course, as I work there. And in fact, 2 of my colleagues are helping me with this right now, live tweeting, etc. So yeah, so the idea is essentially for people to refer themselves via the website, and then what will happen is on a Zoom, myself and an LGBTQ+ volunteer will essentially take some instructions and then refer that on to an LGBTQ+ lawyer. And the reason why specifically the priority will be given is because I myself am cis, and I want this to be sort of from the community for the community, and I think that it'd be best if the volunteer identifies as LGBTQ+, and also the lawyer does. And I think that's got 2 strands to it. The first is, of course, so people feel comfortable, but the second is hopefully to increase, especially with the volunteers, as I hope a lot of them will be law students, it'll increase diversity within within the profession, and it gives people sort of a chance to see how a clinic might work, and I think like be something that could inspire people, hopefully, because there's a lot of people, especially especially trans people, who don't get the opportunities and would be a far better lawyer than I could ever be, that really should be given those opportunities. So that's kind of the thinking behind it. There is an email specifically for it, which again will be put in the chat, but it's only an email that is kind of preliminary, I guess, because it's just for lawyers and for prospective lawyers and for volunteers to get in touch with me. And that is Cardiff LGBTQ Clinic at protonmail.com. Proton Mail is just a very secure email service, so complete confidentiality there, which is why I chose Proton Mail. But yeah, so I think that it's, for me, this is a really great opportunity to sort of get people sort of aware of what's happening, and to really push against those sort of systems that oppress a lot of the LGBTQ plus community. And I said that it was specifically for T, for the T, and I said the emphasis will be on the T. And the way that that will happen is I've created a Know Your Rights short booklet that is finished, but I need to get second opinions on it, of course, which will be given to every trans individual that comes to the service. And also something that's more of a longer term aspect of the clinic is doing workshops with trans-led organizations to fight the unjust systems, essentially, and working with trans organizations to fight systems through the law. And that's something a project that will be part of it and will hopefully take more shape as the months go on. So yes, I'll just sort of finish by saying that I think it's really important. I think with the current political climate, especially the government scrapping the Gender Recognition Act reform, and also the sort of rise in anti or trans or transphobic rhetoric, I think this is a pivotal sort of initiative, and I'm really happy to be surrounded and given support by such amazing people that continue to inspire me. And from there, I will introduce the first speaker. So the first speaker is Angharad Price. Angharad is principal lawyer for the Equalities Human Rights Commission. She's a barrister, and as I said, has given me support through this as well. So speakers will speak for about 5 to 10 minutes. Angharad, as we spoke before, but take it away. Feel free to speak about what you like.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm really excited to talk at this launch because I think the idea is brilliant. There's a real gap, I think, across Wales in terms of access to justice, but I think this is a real key area that you've hit upon, and I think it's a great project, which is why when you approached me about it, I was keen to be as supportive as possible, sort of personally as well as on behalf of the Commission. So probably I should sort of introduce myself slightly before I start talking. I'm conscious I don't want to go too far over my time and hog time of talking, but just very briefly, I'm the Welsh lawyer at the Commission. So about 18 months ago I started, and that's because the Equality and Human Rights Commission, we cover Scotland, England and Wales, but the Commission recognised that we needed specific Welsh expertise because so many areas on equality and human rights are devolved to Wales. And I think LGBT issues, even though perhaps, as you've mentioned, some things like gender recognition aren't devolved, so many decisions made by Welsh Government and in Wales now are different to England, and therefore there is really that need for Welsh specific advice in this area as well as in others. And I just wanted to talk very briefly about some of the things that the Commission has highlighted. We are the statutory body that promotes equality and human rights, and we have specific legal powers and specific obligations in those areas. But one of the things we do is publish a big research report every 3 years. One called Is Britain Fairer, but a specific Wales one called Is Wales Fairer? And there are a number of points within that I think are relevant to your clinic. And in particular, one of the issues that we've been highlighting, the last report was in 2018, and we're actually gearing up for the next one in 2021. But one of the really sort of key areas, I think, in terms of both sexual orientation and gender reassignment, which is the way we talk about it because that's how it's protected under the Equality Act. In both of those areas, we throughout the Is Wales Fairer, you'll see references to data gaps, and in particular for people whose sexual orientation and are undergoing gender reassignment. in terms of the characteristics under the Act. And so, yeah, that I think is a huge issue, both, you know, sort of in terms of data collection, but also, you know, in bringing together issues. And that's why I think the project could be key in highlighting and recording and you know, drawing together themes that might then be put forward to make significant changes. So that's one of the things I wanted to highlight. A couple of the others within the Is Wales Fairer are things like hate crime and how there's been no improvement in prosecution, and also significant issues in terms of domestic violence. And one of the reasons I just wanted to highlight, you know, the statistics themselves are within the report, but we've recently been speaking a lot because we have a programme of work about race issues. And Race Equality First in Wales do a lot of work supporting people with discrimination claims, but also who have been subject to hate crime, and how they can address those sorts of issues. So I think that's an area where this clinic, hopefully, I know that Crash and Shash are going to talk to you a bit about their, you know, their own experiences and lived experiences of people, but that was one of the areas that I was hopeful that this clinic might be able to put forward those sorts of things and maybe bring about changes. And that brings me on a little bit to what the Commission does. So we don't sort of support individual cases as such. We do provide legal funding sometimes to individuals, but we always do it on the basis of strategic litigation. So we had an event earlier that talks all about that, but basically what it is trying to bring legal claims or other work that we can do to make significant policy or legislative changes that can improve people's equality and human rights. And so again, I think referrals hopefully from this project and from this clinic, you know, to the Commission could lead to us undertaking work, not necessarily legal cases, but possibly we do compliance work or policy influencing or all sorts of types of work, enforcement work. We have specific enforcement powers. So I just really hope that it will increase our knowledge, and you know, referrals might be able to help lead on to us doing more work in this area in Wales. And another side to that also, you know, I felt almost dreadful that when you asked me if there were any LGBT, you know, legal professionals I could recommend to you to support the clinic, I couldn't, you know, pin down people that I knew of that would have lived experiences and would be beneficial to the clinic. So that seems to me obvious then that there's probably a gap. I know quite a lot of lawyers in Wales, and therefore I felt that that's, you know, hopefully something within this that you'll be successful in addressing. So that's all I wanted to say, but I'm happy to, I'll be staying and answering any questions anyone wants to ask me anything about the Commission or anything else. Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Shankara. That was super useful and very enlightening. And exactly what you said, which is part of the thing I talked about, challenging unjust systems, that strategic litigation. That's something that is super useful, and something that the Equalities Human Rights Commission, I think, is a perfect sort of partner in doing that and accomplishing that. Right, and on that note, I'm going to introduce our next speaker. It's Crash Wigley. She's from Young Legal Aid Lawyers. She's also going to be a barrister very soon, undertaking a pupillage in Civitas Chambers here in Cardiff. I'm very happy that she's here speaking with us. And without further ado, Crash, if you'd like to take over.
Yeah, everyone says they'll be starting as a barrister, and I just want to make it clear that it's contingent on me passing my exam, which have not been done yet. But thanks for that introduction, Hussain. It's been great to hear both of you so far. As Hussain said, I coordinate YLAL Cymru, and YLAL stands for Young Legal Aid Lawyers. So we're a group of junior practitioners and students who are committed to fighting for a fair legal aid system and access to justice for all. And I just wanted to start off by saying, you know, we know how crucial the work of law centres is, in particular, in empowering communities to understand and enforce their legal rights. And really wanted to commend the work of Speak Easily and everyone who works there, and all those who volunteer there as well. And actually at YLAL, that one of the things we've been doing is supporting the North Wales Law Centre project, because currently the law centre we have in Cardiff, Speak Easy, is the only one in the whole of Wales, and that really needs to change. So if anyone here lives in the North and would like to have maybe a similar clinic someday in that area, then please get in touch with me after this. It's been really nice to see the work on the LGBTQ plus clinic, and some of you might be aware that before I started training as a lawyer, I worked at Stonewall Cymru as a policy and campaigns officer, and I've got a week of assessments next week, and it's initiatives like this that really remind me why I'm doing what I'm doing, and how LGBTQ people and other marginalised people can use the law to advance equality, and as Hussain said, you know, to challenge unjust systems that form the basis of so much of our society. So I've been asked to think about what this clinic might mean for LGBTQ communities and for trans people in particular. And I wanted to start off by saying I think it is really, really good that this clinic has such a stated dedication to centering the needs of trans people, as well as being a clinic for all LGBTQ people, because we know that although there are still substantial difficulties in terms of discrimination and abuse experienced by LGBT people across the board, even in spite of the legal advances we've seen in recent years in terms of anti-discrimination law and equal marriage. All the research we have shows that trans people and also disabled LGBT people of colour, LGBT people in working class backgrounds are at the sharp end of discrimination. And the history of the gay rights movement or the LGBT rights movement is, it sort of reflects the fact that trans people have always been there, or often at these really important historical moments, advocating for change and taking part in protests and demonstrations. And yet, at many times in history, trans communities have kind of been left out of opportunities to achieve change and to advocate for change, and have been sidelined. And so I think having that focus is really important for this clinic. So I wanted to share some statistics too, and all these figures are from either Stonewall Cymru or Stonewall research from the last 3 or 4 years. But in terms of what we know about what people are experiencing, we know that over half of LGBT young people in Wales have experienced bullying on the basis of their sexual orientation or gender identity when they're at school, and that increases to about 3/4 for trans young people. 2 in 5 trans pupils actually say that they can't even be known by their preferred name when they're in school. So these are people who are going to school every day and being called the wrong name by their school. We know there are widespread experiences of discrimination in goods and services, things like accessing healthcare, going to pubs, restaurants, cafes. We also know that almost 1 in 4 LGBT people in Wales say they've experienced hate crime in the last 12 months. And that's a figure that's risen significantly over the last decade. And that goes to over half of trans people saying they've experienced an incident of hate crime just in the last year. But I think even that figure is a bit misleading, because what you get in some of that research is quotes from people who say that they fear a hate incident pretty much every time they leave the house. They think that something might happen. So it's not just one over the course of the year, but it might be once a week. And I remember when I first came out as trans, which was when I was at university about 8 years ago, that was very much my experience. I would be walking to lectures or going to the library to pick up a book, and someone would spit at me in the street or point and laugh. Someone would shout, "That's a man." And I think I don't say these experiences for people to feel sorry about what I've gone through in the past, and I don't experience that much hate or abuse these days. Many trans people do. I share it because I think there is a blindness to what people are experiencing day to day in our communities here in Wales. And the thing about hate crime is that it's something that attaches a lot of stigma and shame. So it's not something that people often find very easy to talk about, which means if you're not experiencing it or witnessing it, you might be completely unaware of what's going on. I think the reason why I don't experience as much hate and abuse as I used to is in part because in some ways I've kind of stepped up a social ladder a little bit since I was a student. So I became a professional, and as a result had more money, probably dressed differently, and dressed in a more professional way, which stops you from being singled out for abuse. And also I got enough money to get a car, which means that I wasn't walking places as much and I wasn't using public transport as much. I don't think it's because society got a lot better in terms of how it deals with trans people. And if anything, the data shows that in terms of hate crime and discrimination, it's getting worse. it's easy to think that that's just street harassment, but obviously those attitudes of disrespect towards trans people trickle into all areas of life. So for me, when I was at Oxford, it included things like hostile university staff saying that they weren't going to respect my pronouns, or a GP who told me that being trans was a lifestyle choice, or GP reception staff who changed the details on my medical records about my gender without my consent or even telling me. And those experiences of abuse and discrimination cause trans people often to shrink ourselves. So people withdraw from public life often because these experiences are very draining, and they might be humiliating for people. And so people might stay at home and just not take as big a role in public life as they otherwise would. And one of the things that I've heard from trans people that really moved me when talking about the COVID epidemic is that I've heard people say things that they've been grateful for lockdown because it's meant that they don't have to leave the house to go to work, for example, if they work from home, or medical appointments are online. And so if people were being abused regularly on the commute, they've enjoyed the experience of not having to leave the house, which is the complete inverse of everyone else who has missed the opportunities to play a full part in public life. I've heard people say that they enjoy being able to cover their face with a mask because it means that they've got less abuse about their appearance when they're out doing the shops, and it's reduced the levels of discrimination. Now, what kind of life are people living if these are things that they have essentially welcomed because it's actually made their lives easier? Now, one of the things that I think has changed in recent years, as trans people have got more visible, is actually we see more and more trans people vocally standing up for our right to participate fully in public life and to refuse to shrink away and keep ourselves to ourselves. I think there are two things that make such a big difference and that have made a big difference to me in my life. One of them is finding community with other LGBTQ people who can build you up in the face of a society that's doing a lot to knock you down over and over again. But I also think the law has an important role to play because we have laws against discrimination, we have laws against harassment, and I think properly these laws can be a way of people to reassert their right to play a full role in public life and to rebuild their dignity, because the law allows a recognition that what happened to somebody was wrong and shouldn't have happened, and it provides a mechanism for people to see consequences and accountability for the people who've mistreated them. It allows people to play a role and empower them to stop things like this happening to other people in the future. And it just is a way for people to realize that this kind of abuse or discrimination is not something that we have to put up with. Now, historically, there have been lots of invisible barriers that stop trans people from engaging with legal systems. And I think people here will be familiar with the access to justice issues. But I think this clinic has the opportunity to deal with the two main ones. The first is money. Many trans people, as a result of discrimination in the jobs market or in education, don't have a lot of money to spend defending their rights at law. And so a law centre that can provide advice and support and representation for free is clearly going to make a difference. But the other thing is the fear of discrimination and disrespect, even when seeking out legal services. And again, I think the way that Hussain has envisaged this law clinic involving as many LGBTQ people as possible and doing a lot to try and gain the confidence of the community that people will be listened to and respected is again going to do a lot to deal with those fears that people might have. So that's all I have to say. And I wanted to say thanks so much for showing your interest in this project, and congratulations to everyone who's been involved so far, but I think it's got a really exciting future.
Thank you so much, Crash, for that. Was so powerful, and I can't understate just how much help Crash has given me, both just through just helping what I sent to stuff like, Crash, can you have a look at this, or just in terms of, you know, just in general, just our friendship and the guidance that she sort of has helped through helped me through this. It's been and also speaking here, it's really, I'm really grateful for it. And I just want to add just and I think, you know, Crash, you made some incredibly important points, and I think that's like why sort of the legal advice for trans people in this clinic, I want to be as open as possible, in the sense that the difficulties for trans people doesn't just come from hate crime or the massive discrimination cases that you see in the news. It's you know, well, you can barely see them, to be honest, but those things that happen is also just the risk of being misgendered, or just the risk of being completely ignored, or just being, you know, just those tiny things to someone actually really affect trans people and just their ability to get on with their lives. So I think that's why I think that even you know, what might be a trivial legal issue to somebody going to see a you know, a random lawyer is something that I want to be LGBTQ plus lawyers, and you know, trans lawyers specifically, because that's the people that I want to be sort of leading this. And yeah, so that was really great. And on that note, I'm going to introduce our last speaker, and after this there'll be time for questions and sort of like just a conversation, I guess, between everyone here. And our last speaker is Shash. I'm really happy Shash has joined us today. Shash, she's co-founder of Trans Aid Cymru, which is an incredible initiative of mutual aid networks. They have one in a chapter in Swansea and a chapter in Cardiff, to help trans people, as Crash mentioned, that often face destitution, being able to just survive daily life. And I think that's, you know, incredibly useful. Shash is also an organizer, an activist, public speaker. So I'm really happy that she's here with us today. So Shash, if you want to take it away.
Yeah. Can everyone hear me okay? Yeah, cool. So so a bit about the mutual aid, more than anything, I guess, is we are a mutual aid group that helps trans people, and we, not necessarily just in financial means, but also upskilling trans people from skills the trans community is able to provide. So we run workshops and things like that. So trans people for trans people, very similar to what Hussain mentioned about the clinic, in providing trans lawyers for trans people. T for T, if you will, a joke for those in the know. So I hope to be quite brief, because honestly I'm not feeling so well, but um I am really happy to be speaking here about this clinic, because I have recommended people to Speakeasy from Trans Aid Cymru to service users, and it is genuinely a delight to know that there is an initiative that specifically centers trans people, and it is some of the things that I might talk about is possibly uncomfortable, that people don't realize. And one of the things that specifically, we talked a lot about hate crime today, and one of the things I would like to talk is the reporting process for hate crime. A lot of the stats we get for hate crime, unfortunately, from the police at least, is crimes that actually get reported. The issue is that trans people and LGBT people, we get hate crimes so much, it is almost impossible to document everything and report it to the police. It is, and that is if the police will take it seriously. A lot of the time, we face the same transphobia from the people that are meant to protect us, and it's a true shame. And a lot of the time, we are, just today I was talking to a service user who was hate crime essentially, and the police said they couldn't do anything because it wasn't a direct strike, whatever that means. This person is homeless, struggling in temporary accommodation, and this is the kind of people that, you know, the powers that be are meant to protect, but have been left without support in this regard. And it's not surprising when you talk to most trans people that they just don't report hate crime and things like that, because at the end of the day, it's too much effort to report something that's going to happen next week. And this isn't necessarily, and we are grateful for the Equality Act, honestly, and some of the things the Equality Act affords us, especially with the case that was brought that covered it specifically shows that non-binary people are covered under the Equality Act, and it's that kind of stuff is great, but it honestly it took a long time to get there, and it's it's not easy. It's not an easy access. For example, I can name several anecdotes, and I probably will as going through, but our mutual aid, we deal with a lot of vulnerable trans people. We deal with trans people who are struggling, who have maybe not got their who are not maybe, under predatory landlords or housing associations. We've had issues where, people have been discriminated against for being like finding a place to live. We once had a case where there's a, a, a we once had a service user who reported that they were passed up for a place because they were trans, and the reason we knew it was because of transphobia is because they were willing to offer more rent than the person it went to. And we had people who have been discriminated from employment during a pandemic, where people are looking for this is for the retail sector. This person was hoping to stack shelves at Tesco or Asda, and they were essentially told no when they were looking for people, and they're constantly looking for people, and this happens on a day-to-day basis, and and it becomes abundantly clear how unsurprising it is that trans people aren't able to move up the socioeconomic ladder, because there are systemic forces against us, and it sounds almost conspiratorial, but when we experience it, we live it day to day, and it's genuinely horrifying. I'm a trans person of color, and a statistic that you'll hear banded about is that trans women of color can have a life expectancy of 35. That isn't necessarily true. However, it is horrifying to think that it's become so normalized and acceptable. um we the majority of trans people that are murdered are people of color. We There is the intersection of trans and race, trans and disability, and trans and sex work. One of the things that a lot of people are forced into while being trans is sex work, and survival sex work. And although the laws here currently allow sex work to an extent, there are laws surrounding sex work which make it very hard to actually operate. For example, there are laws, I believe, at least in Northern Ireland, where a landlord can kick you out if you are found to have been doing sex work. Your civil forfeiture, where police can seize your finances or anything if you can't prove that it was from something legitimate, and that counts for sex work. It is genuinely horrifying that the struggles that a lot of these people go through, and the only things, and we are forced to take routes that are seemed unseemly by the eyes of the law, if it's as it were, and it makes it harder for us to navigate. Things like even just applying for benefits, for example. I get frequently misgendered on every single PIP letter I get. For a long time it said for a long time it said Dr. Shash Apan. I'm not a doctor, never was, never said it. For some reason the title was doctor, and now it says Mr. And I've sent my deed polls several times. I think they have at least a few copies by now. I don't know what they're doing with it. But this isn't an uncommon occurrence, and it is unfortunate we are going through this. We have, and that's partially why the mutual aid exists, because the system has failed us, and we are trying to provide us. And it's so glad that we have something like this law clinic, which allows us to refer people who are facing legal troubles, where we do need lawyers to represent us and fight for us, and for this to exist. There is, because the TERFs being trans exclusion, radical feminists, and transphobes, and the powers that be, are using legal representation to dismantle our rights. They have recently used that in the Kira Bell case in order to deny under 18s life-saving medical care. And it is unfortunate that, and my heart goes out to those trans kids who have been essentially denied something that they fought so hard for, and and I personally, and as the mutual aid, cannot do much in that respect, because there's only so much that we can do, and this is something that we need, obviously, things like the law to catch up on, and legal fights. We are genuinely struggling on a level that is not ever represented in the media. We are not given spaces to talk about ourselves. So spaces like this and hearing our experiences are some of the, like, I am one of many, essentially. This is not an uncommon occurrence. I am lucky to have the privilege now to speak to you, the ability to speak to you, the comfort that I am having time and not having to worry about food on my table or roofs. And this is the thing. It's not necessarily about trans specific issues that we face, and it's very much every facet of our lives is colored in transphobia. There is so much against us that we genuinely struggle, and things in the process itself, things like deed polls and the GRC, we need legal representation for stuff like that. Like, if you're under 18, you need legal representation for your deed poll. You need parental consent. And if you have a transphobic family, good luck, essentially. It's and schools who discriminate. There is so much that I can't even start to describe. I mean, just yesterday I was essentially silenced for trying to, stand up for trans rights. I attended a hustings event. It's an event that's meant to help me, make an informed decision in democracy in our Senate elections. And unfortunately, because I had a trans flag in my background and they had decided to platform a transphobic individual, I was blocked. I wasn't unable to participate. They did not take any of my questions about transphobia. They did not challenge this transphobic individual, and essentially, this event was meant for young people like me, 16 to 25, to get us to vote in the upcoming election, and things like that is not uncommon, and that's what's so sad. It is incredibly depressing, to say the least. So I am extremely glad that this law clinic exists, especially considering the amount of trans people that I know who have access to speakeasy services, and we are eternally grateful. Thank you for hearing me out and our experiences, and I'll pass it over back to Hussain.
I'm eternally grateful for that, Shash. That was brilliant, and yeah, very, very, very powerful again. And it being through the speakeasy, working in the speakeasy, I mean, it's a really important sort of As Crash mentioned, the only law centre at the moment in Wales. It's, you know, it's vital for so many communities, and the Speakeasy have been more than supportive of this. You know, so and I think it's not conspiratorial at all. It's, you know, it's every system is against trans people, and that's why we sort of created the Know Your Rights, a small booklet. But again, that's just barely anything compared to the amount of difficulty that trans people face on a day-to-day basis that cis people just will never experience. So, you know, we've got a long way to go, but I'd like to think that this is something that can, I don't know, make a dent in that path. So I'm really, again, happy that everyone's here, and I think now what we'll do is open it up to questions and sort of contributions, if anyone has any for the clinic, or for the speakers in general, just about what, if something came up that you'd like to speak about, please feel free. I think you can put your hand up on it, and I'm not sure how I'll be able to tell if somebody's done that, but
yep, and you can also just click the mute button and you should be able to mute yourself. Oh, someone's asked, is the Know Your Rights booklet available online?
So the Know Your Rights booklet, it's I think I'm being a bit kind calling it a booklet. It's not necessarily a booklet. It's just something that's, you know, quite I guess small and easy to sort of digest. Don't go too much, but it's a PDF that I can send to emails and to anyone that wants it. I could even post it, but we'll get some of those physically created. When this was going to be in person, they were going to be basically at the front desk, and people could pick them up and take them away. But that's kind of changed, obviously, with the coronavirus. So what is they're online at the moment, in terms of, I'll be disseminating them. It's not completely finished yet, but I think what we'll do on the Speakeasy website, most likely we'll have a place, I guess, for that to be accessible as well. But yeah.
And please do share that with me. I'm happy to kind of share it far and wide, as you know. I've got another question. Is there an application deadline to become a volunteer?
Right, so no, there's not an application deadline, but we're planning to start somewhere in mid-March. Yeah, March is coming up, right? Yeah, mid-March, mid-March. So if you could email me as soon as possible, but like I said, it's not a deadline. I mean, if people want to get involved later on, as I'm sure more people hear about it as it goes along, it's not like a closed door. You know, I'm hoping that it'll be once a month, but seeing how many people come, I mean, it depends. We might make it longer, or more frequent, I should say. It really depends, but yeah, and it's no deadline. But if you could try and get them in before mid-March, that would be, I guess, most useful. And then I can create a nice little WhatsApp group or something like that of all the volunteers, so we can coordinate.
That's great, and that email is in the chat, but I will re-share it again. And is there somebody else that's put a question forward? Oh, I have a question about the application form and the referee section. I'd like to know if it's mandatory to have a referee recommending us for the clinic, because I have a referee, but for my degree, can I use them, or do I have to ask a specific type of person?
It's not really formal, to be honest. Where that came from was I sent it to I volunteer in Asylum Justice, which is a charity that gives free representation to asylum seekers, and the chair is a professor in Cardiff Uni, and I said, can we disseminate this to Cardiff Uni students? And she said, maybe make a referee so students get used to this sort of stuff. It's not necessarily like a you know, formal thing, like I'll be on the phone to these referees or anything like that. So if you really, you know, you can use university one. If you don't have a referee, I mean, I'm not going to boycott. It's just more of a sort of experience thing from what I was told. So yeah, it's not that formal.
In the interest of you getting the referee experience, I would say if you are going to use your university referee, it's probably worth just mentioning to them that you are listing them as your referee before you make this application.
And I would say for any referee in life, actually, it's not just a courtesy, it's very helpful. We've got a message here from, so somebody sent me a direct message, so I'm not sure if I'm allowed to see who they are, but they would really appreciate it. It's a gender service. being sent leaflets and any information so that I can help share them physically and obviously digitally as well. So I'll make sure that that gets shared with Hussain, because it's fantastic, and that's exactly what we need. We need frontline services as well as this signposting back to the clinic. So yes, anything you can do in that way, I'm very sure you'll have the resources to be able to do that. It's incredibly kind. Thank you. Yeah, and lots of thank yous for setting up an incredible clinic. It's such good timing, and I think having raised some of the specific issues as a result of the pandemic, but showing that people would rather kind of stay in a lockdown to prevent some issues that they're facing. I just think that we've got to change that. That's such a sad place for us to be in as a society. So congratulations to you all. Any other questions coming in? What organisation is the principal funder of the project or the speakeasy? Perhaps that's someone that missed the intro. Would you like to pick back up on that again, Hussain, please?
Yeah, of course. So the clinic doesn't necessarily have a funder. We've got no funding. We might do in the future funding applications if we do certain things or ideas that stem from it, but it's not funding at the moment. It comes from the Justice First Fellowship, which is part of the Legal Education Foundation. That's where the project sort of originates from, and it's hosted by the Speakeasy and given the full support by the Speakeasy, and will be in the Speakeasy. So that's sort of the I guess the sort of tree of where it all sort of fits. Yes, there's no specific funders. We got support from LawWorks and from other organisations, but like Legal News, for example. But it's not necessarily funded by anyone in particular.
Yeah, but please don't confuse that with we don't need funding. I think any donations going into the Speakeasy and Reaching Justice Wales, Access to Justice Foundation, anybody that gives grants as well to these kind of clinics is just huge. Please don't forget that, basically. So yes, if you would like to fund and you want any direction for that, let me know. Any selection criteria, requirements for volunteers? Is there any? I think we kind of covered it, but we can always cover it again.
I mean, there's no real selection criteria. I mean, LGBTQ plus is sort of priority, and again, trans would be the priority on the priority. But in terms of there's no specific. I sent it through law students or 2 law students in the University of South Wales, Swansea, and Cardiff, mostly because it's again one of the strands of trying to diversify the legal profession and get hopefully trans lawyers and LGBTQ plus lawyers active and involved, and then that's kind of the sort of the idea behind that. But there's not necessarily, again, I won't turn anyone away if you're not happening to be in a law because a law degree, because again that's a structural inequality, isn't it? Or a systemic inequality.
Are volunteer applications only open to students at Welsh universities? Yeah, it's weird because we're in a virtual world at the moment, aren't we? So what are your plans there?
I think, again, priority will be given to people within sort of Wales, just in the sense of keeping it, I guess, community oriented, I guess. But again, I wouldn't necessarily block anyone from being outside, but I think it makes more practical sense, especially once I assume the pandemic will end. We'll have more of a physical gathering, and it would be quite useful to have people who would be able to attend quite easily and be able to help out quite easily. I'm not sure if anyone has any comments on that, or maybe I'm completely wrong, but that's kind of, yeah. Go on, Crash.
No, I was going to say there's also a question from Rudy that's I think got lost in the chat, but further up he said, will you be able to help with practical things like helping out asylum seekers with applications and helping disabled LGBTQ people challenge DWP decisions? So I thought I'd just flag that up.
Thank you.
Yeah, most definitely. I think that's a really important point, and I think that I know that Welsh Refugee Council are actually doing work on stuff around asylum accommodation for LGBTQ plus individuals that will be working hopefully with because people I know within Welsh Refugee Council have sort of spoken to me about that only today actually. But so that's something we'll 100% definitely be able to sort of try and help out and refer to lawyers that will be able to do that, whether that be, for example, where volunteering in asylum justice or other organizations. That would be something, yeah, most definitely. We're hoping to cover like sort of it really, to be honest, how many lawyers we can get that can cover such wide areas of law. I don't think really there's a sort of limit on what we can do. It's just how many people we can get to be able to help. And I've luckily also got some good friends and colleagues who work in, for example, the HRC or PLP that have spoken to me about being able to sort of help with very complex sort of discrimination cases and doing things like that as well.
Brilliant. And yeah, and actually Rudy said that's fantastic, because we've been struggling to support people with these issues. It's just helping to kind of fill a huge gap, isn't it, in provision and support. So I'm so excited. I can't wait to see how it unfolds as well. And obviously that although Cardiff's in the branding, it's not limited to, is it? So covering, hoping to cover quite an extensive side of Wales, or would you like to inspire other clinics to be set up across Wales?
Well, I think it's I think David from Lawworks was talking to me about this as well. Like I said, they give a lot of support, talking about maybe branching out to other clinics as well. But for now, I think, try and cover South Wales and those sort of areas. But yeah, what I'd like to see in the future, without getting too far ahead, I guess, is being able to have other law clinics sprout up that sort of take inspiration from this, or we link with, and sort of have more of a network, because it's something that that should have been done a long time ago, really. I think that this is something that has got to a point where, especially with transphobia, has become so rife. It's something that I don't think anyone should never have been able to ignore, but most definitely cannot ignore. So I think that it's wide for now, but hopefully other organizations will sprout up.
As ever, thank you so much. I don't know if anyone else has got any points to make on the panel at all, or one last call to action.
If I can quickly say, I think if we've live tweeted it, and we've tagged organisations like Transaid Cymru and Young Legal Aid Lawyers, and specifically Transaid Cymru as a grassroots organisation. If we can all try and support those initiatives, follow and fund and sort of get involved with them, because like Shash said, it's not just material or money wise, it's also workshops to skill up people as well. So it's a really great initiative. And Young Legal Aid Lawyers, if you're not, Crash normally says this, I'm taking her part, but if you're not part of Young Legal Aid Lawyers, think about joining, because it's a really good organisation as well. So I think that, I don't know if anyone, Shash, Angharad or Crash, have anything else to say?
No, just thanks very much for inviting us.
Yeah, I was going to say the same. Thank you very much. It's such an exciting project, and I just really hope you achieve what you're setting out to do, because I think it will make such a difference.
I have two things to plug, actually, that I've realised. One is, if there are any trans people in the audience who like to sing or might be interested in singing, you should consider coming along to the Cardiff Trans Singers, which is a choir that I run, and we meet on Friday evenings. We're still meeting over Zoom, so feel free to come along. And the other thing for Young Legal Aid Lawyers, we've got an event on the 16th of March, which is going to be like a discussion forum for basically junior lawyers, practitioners and students, etc., who are either working in legal aid in Wales or who are working in areas connected to legal aid, perhaps in the third sector, doing housing advice, debt, etc., or lawyers and students who are supportive of those areas of law. So I will put a link in the chat, and if anyone wants to come along, I'd really encourage them to, because it should be a good opportunity to kind of get to know other people in the sector and think about how we support each other.
Feel free to send me those links, guys, behind the scenes, and I'll pop them out to everybody later on as well, if you don't manage to grab it off the chat function. And you know me, I'm always happy to keep sharing stuff and be part of that community. So let me know if you've got any news or events and updates. So thank you very, very much. Go on.
Sorry, I'll just plug a few things as well, if you don't mind. So Transaid Cymru are running some workshops. As you might have heard, we have budgeting for beginners. So if that's people who are trans and struggling, obviously, if you feel free to recommend anyone. We also have, this is open to everyone, but the tickets are limited. Trans life drawing. It is a life drawing event. Specifically, so you get to draw trans bodies. We will have one model, and you get to my partner managing the space. And yeah, and then final workshop for of this particular set is empowering trans POC. So if you're a trans POC out there, please sign up. I'll be hosting the workshop, is to help get us, motivated and together, networked, really, essentially. But yes, if you want to help Transaid Cymru, please check out our website, transaid.cymru. We do all our expenses and everything is transparent on Open Collective. And yeah, there we go. Thank you.
So thank you and good night.
Thank you.